Hi everybody, I'm John with Communicate with Command, and welcome to the channel. If you haven't watched my videos before, hopefully you get a lot out of each one on my channel, and if you like the videos, please give them the thumbs up, and before you forget, click that little subscribe button, and if you want to get notifications, click on that little bell icon, and that'll let you know every time I make a new video. In today's video, we're going to talk about verbal fillers. What are verbal fillers? I just gave you one, didn't I? Yes, is a verbal filler. Like, so, and anytime you're filling in the conversation like that, it's a verbal filler. So today I'm going to give you some tips on getting rid of verbal fillers. Let's get started. Let's jump right in. So I just described for you some of those verbal fillers. So at the beginning of a sentence, like I just gave you, is another one. And when you're giving a formal presentation, it's best to eliminate as many of those as possible. Let's talk about how you can get rid of some of those verbal fillers. Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to identify which verbal fillers you use frequently and how frequently you use them. And one great way to do that is to record yourself. Just like I'm doing now. Just record yourself on your phone. Set up your phone, set up your laptop or your desktop camera and record yourself for just a couple of minutes and speak on a topic, and then watch yourself, watch your own video or listen to your own video if you're doing it with a voice recorder, and then figure out which verbal fillers you used. Write them down. Now, if you hang around to the end of this video, I got some great exercises for you to do, some great topics that you could speak on that will help you figure out which verbal fillers you're using and help you eliminate them. And if you're an instructor, these are really great for a class activity. So stick around to the end and I'm going to give you some of those ideas. All right, so once you've recorded yourself and you've listened to yourself or watched yourself and written down the verbal fillers that you found, and every time you say the same one, circle it. So for instance, if you say then the first time you say in that video, write it down on your piece of paper as you're taking notes. And then if you say 5 more times, then you should have 5 more circles around that word So that way you'll know how many times you've said each one of those verbal fillers. And it really helps you figure out which ones you say most frequently. And when you're conscious of them, then you're more conscious of preventing them when you give a presentation. That really does help. So the next step is to actually practice your presentation and slow down. Slow down a little bit and listen for those verbal fillers. Focus instead, not on the verbal fillers themselves, of course, but focus on what you're trying to say so that you can eliminate those verbal fillers. That will really help. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. If you're giving a public speech, if you're giving a presentation in a class or at a business meeting, if you make a mistake, it's okay. Don't get flustered. Don't cover it up with verbal fillers going, crap, hold on. The audience will actually respect you if you take a moment of silence. Don't be afraid of silence. There's a lot of research done on what works well and what doesn't work well in public speaking, and a lot of that research says that the audience will respect you if you take a moment to pause and collect your thoughts. Once you've done that, let's say you're going off note cards, and I get lost in my speech. Instead of using a lot of verbal fillers to try to cover it up and stumble and get more nervous because I don't know exactly where I should be next in my speech, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to collect my thoughts as I take some slow, deep breaths. And then when I figure out what I want to say next, I'm going to look up at the audience. I'm going to establish eye contact because that shows confidence. And then you smile and go with what your next thought is, with what the next thought or the next idea that you're supposed to be presenting should be. Go with that. Take that moment of reflection and silence to collect your thoughts, calm yourself down with a deep breath, establish the eye contact, and then continue. And the audience will respect you for it. They don't care that you messed up. I know a lot of people think that, but they don't care. Everybody messes up. Everybody. We all mess up at some point. That's part of being human. So just collect your thoughts and readdress them, and they'll respect you for that. Especially if you give them that eye contact when you continue. And then before you give a formal presentation, make sure you rehearse more. Practice even more. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that you're not supposed to memorize your presentation. You're supposed to think about the flow of information in different blocks. Think about it like this. I want to talk about this, and then I want to talk about this, and after I'm done talking about that, then I need to talk about this. Think about it as a flow of information and things that you need to talk about. Don't think about it as memorizing all these words, because that's going to make you even more flustered and lead to more verbal fillers. So when you practice, focus on the ideas that you're conveying. Focus on creating good sentences to present those ideas, even if those sentences don't match what you had on paper. That's okay. The audience doesn't care that the sentences match what you had on paper. Not all of them read your paper. Most of the time, your audience doesn't read the paper that you're presenting from, right? What they're concerned about is the ideas. So give them those ideas, flesh them out with good sentences. After you talk about that topic, then talk about the next topic or the next idea in that flow of information in your presentation. And if you focus really on what you're trying to say, it'll help you eliminate those verbal fillers. It really will. Okay, so there are your steps. Identify which ones you use and how frequently you use them. Record yourself and listen to accomplish that. Practice and slow down. If you make a mistake, collect your thoughts, take a deep breath, establish eye contact, readdress the audience. And then rehearse more and focus on what you're saying instead of those verbal fillers. Now, if you've stuck around this long in the video, thank you, by the way. Give me a thumbs up. But here are your activities for you to help you eliminate verbal fillers. And this works great in a classroom environment. If you're an instructor listening to this, here's a terrific way to do it. But if you're practicing this on your own, this is a good way too. Get out a stopwatch or pull up the stopwatch on your phone and hit start. And keep speaking for 2 minutes on the topic that I give you, or the topic that you randomly choose. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of these random topics. I used to do this with my students, and I'd have the students come up one at a time to the front of the room, and I'd give them a topic to talk on right then and there, and they'd have to talk on it for 2 minutes. And then as they would say the verbal fillers, then the audience would start raising their hands. So what I did was I typically divide the room into two equal teams, and then I'd call somebody up from team A, the A team, and then they'd be speaking for 2 minutes. And if they made any verbal fillers, then the B team players, they would start raising their hands one by one for each verbal filler that person made. And then we'd keep a tally on the board, and then the team with the fewest number of marks won that challenge. Okay? And then you can reward them accordingly however you wish. But here are some of the topics that I used to give my students, and these would work great for you if you're practicing this on your own or if you're an instructor. So when somebody comes up, you tell them, tell us about your most blank moment. So you could say your most embarrassing moment, and they'd have to speak for 2 minutes on that. Or your most proud moment, the moment you were most proud of doing something. And then they have to speak for 2 minutes. Tell us about a typical blank at your house. So this works really well with holidays. It's always good to ask. Not everybody celebrates all the holidays, but you can ask. Does your family happen to celebrate Christmas or winter solstice or anything like that? If so, then tell us about a typical Christmas or winter solstice celebration at your house. Now, it's good if you're an instructor to be able to give them some quick ideas throughout if they get stuck, so they don't sit there forever quietly. Now, if they're quiet, then you extend their time, but give them some quick ideas. So if somebody got stuck on this, for instance, and they told us about the holiday really quickly, then I'd say, we need more details. What do you cook? What does everybody eat? Do you have a tradition for opening presents? Do you go in a certain order? Do you open one on Christmas Eve? Don't just give me yes or no, give me an explanation. And then that's a great way to stimulate further conversation within that 2-minute frame. And you can do that really quickly. Another one is describe the worst imaginable blank. So the worst imaginable vacation or the worst imaginable date, and tell them to keep it PG-13 if you're in a classroom. But it works really great because this is not something that's concrete that really happens. They have to use their imagination a little bit here, and that's good for them. It's good to stimulate that imagination, but it gives them a little more leeway to saying more because they can make stuff up. So tell us about the worst imaginable vacation or date. And on the opposite side of that, tell us about the ideal. Describe your ideal vacation or your ideal date or the ideal city to live in. Anything like that would work really well. Of course, keep it PG-13 if you're going to do the date thing. And then here's the last one, and this is really my favorite one. This one always turns out pretty funny, and it's fun for students to do this. Tell me what the world would be like if blank and blank. And you can do 2 blanks or you can do 3 blanks, and then you come up with crazy stuff to fill in the blanks. I'll give you a couple examples here. Tell me what the world would be like if there were no sun and we all rode giant rats instead of driving cars. And right now you're going, what? This dude's lost his mind. But there's so much that they can do with that. It's crazy, and it's really fun. It's really fun for those students to get into that. And if anybody gets stuck on this, give each one of these a little bit of thought. Write them down on a sheet of paper so you have them easy to call out. Give these a little bit of thought so you can prompt them, just like the Christmas tradition thing. Prompt them a little bit. So if there were no sun and we all rode giant rats, what does this mean for electrical generation? What does this mean for cleaning up the streets? Do we need more custodians on the streets with brooms? Do we need people that make saddles? Think about how the whole world changes because of those circumstances. Give that a little bit of thought, and then that way you can throw a couple of things their way if they get stuck at some point throughout that 2-minute or 2.5-minute or 3-minute time frame. So some more. Tell me what the world would be like if we all had wings and could fly. Tell me what the world would be like if every time a cat farted, you were granted a wish. I know it's crazy. I know it sounds stupid, but it's so stupid that it's funny. And when you start giving people the ability to create their own wishes because they feed their cat beans, you have no idea what's going to happen in those 2 minutes. And usually it is PG-13, but it turns out really hilarious sometimes, and students have a lot of fun with it. It's always one that my former students would reminisce with me about later on, a couple of years later even. I can't believe you had me talk about what the world would be like if the world were filled with unicorns and we all had springs for feet. You come up with all kinds of crazy stuff, and it makes it really fun. If the earth were made of Nerf and the moon were made of pasta. So give it some thought. Have fun with your students. Eliminate those verbal fillers. Thank you for tuning in. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. Communicate with Command.